Welcome back. It's 6:45. If you've just joined us, a reminder of our top stories this morning.
A massive challenge for the Home Office as attempts to clear the backlog in the asylum system could risk creating new delays. That's according to a damning new report by MPs.
As a Tory MP reveals he was arrested on suspicion of rape, the number of Conservatives embroiled in sexual misconduct allegations grows.
Vladimir Putin wades into the conflict in the Middle East, inviting senior Hamas and Iranian leaders to Moscow for talks, a move that Israel has called obscene.
18 dead, 13 injured and 3 in critical condition as police in the US state of Maine continue their manhunt after a deadly mass shooting yesterday.
With Britain's water facing scandal after scandal, we'll be quizzing the Shadow Environment Secretary, Steve Reed, on what Labour would do to clean up our waters.
And the annual Poppy Appeal launches across the UK, and we've been in Leeds speaking to veterans about how important remembrance is for them. We'll bring you this report later in the show.
And as GB News learns that there have been high-level government discussions about hosting Palestinian refugees in the UK, we'll be debating whether the UK should introduce a similar scheme like the ones used for Ukrainians. Well, joining us now to go through some of the day's headlines is author and journalist Susan Holder and leader of the Heritage Party, David Curtin. Very good to see you both this morning. Thank you so much for your company. Susan, let's start with you, shall we? And there's a story in The Guardian about fears over AI.
Yes, so basically, there's been talk for quite a long time about how we should be pausing the rapid development of AI, and a professor of physics at Massachusetts Institute of Technology, Max Tegmark, has called for a 6-month hiatus on giant AI experiments, just because of the rise in exponential kind of progress they can make. So there's that kind of thing. Rishi Sunak has also this week announced an establishment of an AI Safety Institute, but has said that he thinks it's unfeasible to actually put any sort of kind of stop on the development. They want to kind of look at just the safety aspects. How feasible that is, I don't know, when we can't seem to kind of get Facebook to do what it should do when people want to block things or have problems on that. AI itself, obviously, the main thing people are talking about, I think, as a problem is the way it will multiply itself. And actually, if you program to say something like save the world, what they might think, what the AI would think would be a way to save the world might not include us. It's things like, it's just like giant issues that could come from the power of computers that are 100 times more powerful than the ones we're using.
And David, can I bring you in on this one? Because there's a lot of talk yesterday by Rishi Sunak about how only the nation states coming together can save us from the terror of AI. It felt a bit like COVID all over again to me. What do you make of that?
Yeah, I think that's a very bad idea. I mean, I think this is statism, and this is the advance towards making governments and supranational governments. I thought this would be done through organisations like the UN and the World Economic Forum in charge of tech companies and what happens in the tech sector, which is completely wrong. I mean, the private sector should be allowed to get on with what the private sector does, not governments intervening and controlling everything that happens. I mean, that's a very, very dangerous road to go down. But there are genuine concerns about AI, absolutely. I mean, this is very powerful technology of the like that we've never, ever had before. So we do need to make sure that this isn't going to take us into a future which is dystopian, and the possibility for that exists.
I mean, of course, Rishi Sunak, Susan, would say that there are real benefits to AI. I mean, he was speaking from a hospital talking about the benefits for the health sector in terms of surgery and also detecting illnesses will make things a lot easier in that sense, will streamline that. And in terms of admin, obviously streamline that process as well. So his focus was very much on AI being in the right hands, wasn't it? And that's why it's so important for us to be on the front foot of this.
Absolutely, but who decides? I mean, David makes a good point. Who decides who the right hands are? Yeah. And depending on who's in power at any one time, which way does it go? I mean, obviously, something like this, like any kind of technological advance, is do you use your power for good or for evil? That is the question that we're facing. doing. But regulation and monitoring, and also I just think it is quite a sensible thing to ask for slowing down. Just because we can do something, you always do have to ask, should we? And I do think you can get very overexcited about the fact that technology can do all sorts of things. We're seeing it every day. We're seeing it in the loss of cash, in the way that they harvest all our information everywhere we go, because we can. But should we? There's those kind of issues. And actually, I don't know how we kind of get a hold on that as a world, because there's always going to be different opinions on how you look at that and what is a good thing.
Great point. David, on to a story which no doubt will rise your shackles. The BBC, once again, in a white privilege storm, this time on BBC News Round. What's all this about?
Yeah, they've put a story out aimed at children with a children's book about white privilege, which is, again, propagandizing this idea that white people are bad and are responsible for everything that's gone wrong in the world. And it goes along with this idea that there's this systemic racism in this country and all the other countries in the West. And this is something that just simply shouldn't be propagandized to children. Children should be made to feel proud of their country. I mean, no one would say to an African child in Africa, you have black privilege and therefore you need to hate your country, criticize your history, or Chinese children in China. No one would say to them, you've got Chinese privilege. But it seems to me that in Western countries, there's this whole class of people in education, in the media, that are continually pushing this narrative that white privilege, white supremacy is responsible for everything that's wrong, going back to slavery. And slavery was bad for a 150-year period in our past, absolutely. But we've done some wonderful things as a country, and we were the first country in the world to abolish slavery, and not just in our own country. The Royal Navy spent 100 years in the 19th century going around and abolishing slavery in France, in Arabia, in Turkey, in Spain and Portugal as well. So those are the kind of things that I think should be taught to children about how good our country is, and not just perpetuating this narrative that white people are racist, white people are bad, and we should be ashamed of our country. It's totally wrong.
Susan, what do you make of this story? Should primary school children be taught about white privilege?
I think they should definitely be taught about racism. I think it's a good thing to have other experiences explained to children, obviously. That is a very important thing. I think the tone that is used and how it's done does need looking at, particularly in this case, perhaps. But, I mean, I think we could get kind of overexcited about the story that has been put out there. The Professor of Black Studies at Birmingham City University once claimed that the Queen was the world's #1 symbol of white supremacy. But it doesn't say that's actually what was being accessed in the news round piece that we're talking about.
And he wouldn't have said that the Empire was worse than the Nazis.
Yeah, I mean, that is something that is... But what they're actually kind of talking about to try and explain... What they've tried to do, I think, and perhaps it is in a kind of very heavy-handed way, is talk about what white privilege, if you hear that phrase, what it means. So I think in some ways explanations are not a bad thing, but it depends on how you frame it.
All right, Suze, so you're from the West Country. I'm from Nottingham.
West Midlands.
Yeah, West Midlands,
yeah.
right. I'm from Nottingham. We're both white. We both grew up working class. When did our white privilege kick in? Because I don't remember it. When was the moment?
Well, that's the problem. But we're not the people you ask about, that, are we?
Well, my point is, this is made up.
But we're not the people. I mean, I'm not going to defend somebody kind of using white supremacy or white privilege in a piece to children. But at the same time, I know I'm not the person to defend or advocate for it, because I am white, and it does take sometimes other people to reflect their experiences to you in the learning process. That's all I'd say about that.
Right, we've got 2 minutes left here, so I wanted to touch on the comments from Steve Coogan on a podcast recently. It kind of ties in with what we're talking about now. He's dismissed fans of the royal family as flag-waving idiots. Susan, tell us a bit more.
Yes, he did do this. He was on a podcast, and he does like to be kind of controversial. But, I mean, I will try to do my best to defend Steve on this, because I know people will be shouting at the television that Steve Coogan's come out with something like this. He's kind of trying to speak up for working people. He says he thinks they're flag-waving people who are kind of idiots because people who kind of support the royal family are a power structure that keep a foot on the throat of working-class people. He's trying to be a champion of the people, but he also said that he finds it hard to kind of kick them too much because he does like Duchy Originals and the biscuits that Prince Charles makes. And I think sometimes we do have to remember that Steve Coogan is a comedian. I mean, opinion may be torn on that, but he is a comedian. He's a very fine actor, and he's just come out with things that obviously have made some headlines in a podcast.
David, you've got a flag behind you there, and I'm assuming that you love the royal family. Does that mean that you're an idiot in Steve Coogan's eyes?
Well, I think he would say that I'm an idiot, wouldn't he? Look, I love my country. I'm the royal family that is part of our constitution. The monarch is the centre of our constitution. So this goes back historically, and it's a very good constitution. I mean, I am no fan of some individual members in the royal family, I have to say that, but they're there. And I think if people want to support them and they want to wave a flag, that's fantastic, and it shows patriotism. But, the idea that Steve Coogan is representing the working class is just laughable. He's a multi-millionaire, he's an actor, he's a lovey, and he's very funny. I like what he does, but I think he should stick to acting and stick to entertainment and not involve himself in politics, and certainly not in a way which would disparage a lot of people who are proud of their country and like to wave a flag like I do.
Magnificent.
And David, do you think that people in this country generally are afraid of waving flags and being patriotic?
I don't think they are on the streets in the working class. Once you get outside central London, and there is a lot of pressure there among the establishment media class to actually disparage our nation. And the English flag, for example, it's been made synonymous with hooliganism, and they call it far right, and they call even showing the Union Jack far right at times, which is absolutely outrageous. But I think among the ordinary people, they just don't care. And you see when there's celebrations. The coronation last week, everyone was putting up bunting all over the place. So people don't care about what they're being told by the nation-hating establishment.
Suze, we've got 20 seconds. What do you think of that?
I think he's absolutely right. I think if you give the British public an occasion, they'll take to the streets with their flags, and it's lovely to see, as we did with the coronation.
Yeah, and wasn't that a wonderful sight?
Yeah. I wish I had a flag to wave now. Thanks, guys. Susan, David, marvellous. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And let us know your views on any of those stories that we've just touched upon. I'm sure you're going to have an opinion on those. GBViews@gbnews.com.